Welcome everybody to the new Data Manager Session 1. My name is Melinda Offer and I'm going to be presenting this webinar. I also manage the FAQ mailbox. Today, our learning objectives are to identify STS educational resources and understand how to read the data and software specifications. So this is going to be kind of a quick run through. We only have an hour, but at least you should be able to identify resources being a new data manager. Next slide, please. So who is the STS data manager? Well, you've got a lot of jobs, lots of responsibilities, but most importantly, you're usually pretty compulsive, you're self-motivated, you're flexible, you've got computer skills, and you've got people coming at you from all sides all the time wanting something for you. It's quite a challenging job, but it's extremely important job. Next slide, please. Because as a data manager, you are the key to data quality and integrity. So it's a very, very important job. I'm going to tell you a brief story first, just to kind of let you know that I too used to be a new data manager. And when I first took this job, well, actually, I went into the quality department and they said, oh, you have cardiac experience. You can do this cardiac registry. And I said, oh, okay, I can do that. Well, they said, we have the due date. All of this stuff has to be entered in 6 months. And we have to submit. And I'll see on the floor, there's this pile of data collection forms, about, 3 books high. And I said, oh, okay, I can get that done, right? And then I picked up the data collection form, and there's only two or three things on there. There was a name of a surgeon, a name of a patient, a medical record number, and like a date of surgery. And I was like, oh my God, okay? So I had to get all of this done. I had to complete everything. I had no idea what a training manual was or anything. So I too know what it's like to be a new data manager. So part of this webinar is going to help you to identify what resources are out there, because when I started, I had no resources and no clue, and I did the best I could. But we actually do have a lot of good resources for you. Next slide. All right, so let the games begin. And sometimes it feels like this, right? All right, next slide. So as we go through the data manager resources, we are going to talk about the website, which has got wealth of information, the webinars, the mentorship program, AQO, which is the Advances in Quality Conference. We're going to talk a little bit about the database newsletter and the regional groups, just so that you know what's out there. Next slide. So we'll talk about the database first. When you type in sts.org, it comes up. This is the first thing you see. And as you can see, there's a heading for the STS National Database. And then there's little sub underneath it where you've got adult cardiac, general thoracic, intermax, congenital. At this page, if you just keep scrolling down this page, you're going to find a wealth of information, which is what we're going to go through during the first couple of these slides. Next slide. Okay, so live webinars is a great resource. We offer these webinars a couple of times a month. We have a user group, which deals mainly with IQVIA type issues, submission issues, data upload issues, and things like that, data quality reports. And then we also have an educational call once a month too. The great thing about this is that all of the webinars are recorded. You have a recording, plus you have a PDF. So if you happen to miss the webinar on the particular day that's scheduled, you can always go back and look at it again. All right, next, if you just continue to scroll down on that main page into the database, then you're going to see some really important resources. So we've got a IQVIA Go Live checklist, we've got data manager education, harvest information, software vendor information, conference information, contact information. For example, if you needed to add a surgeon or something, you could go down to the contact information and find out who you need to contact. So there's a great deal of information on the website as it is. Next slide. So a little bit more about the data manager education. It has a dashboard overview. It has a little bit about the mentorship program. It has surveys from other data managers that we do once a year. Just, you can see the results. It also has some anatomical diagrams, for example, coronary anatomy and valve anatomy and things of that nature. So there are some great things in this part of the website that's also useful resources to you. Okay, the mentorship program, talk a little bit about this. It is where the STS pairs an experienced data manager with a less experienced data manager. Now, unfortunately, at this time, as Emily has told me, Emily Conrad is in charge of this, so if you are interested in this, reach out to Emily. We really don't have enough mentors, and we do have a Mente waiting list at this point in time. But hopefully, if you are interested, we've been spreading the word on this, so we're hoping maybe some of the more experienced people would step up and like to become a mentor. I think it's a great program. Okay, the next really good resource that we have, especially for education, is an annual educational meeting for data managers. This year, of course, it's going to be virtual, and it's right around the corner, September the 29th through October the 2nd. We'll be talking about all of it, adult, congenital, thoracic, intermax. And I think the adult cardiac is on October the 1st. But it's a great conference. The surgeons are quite a bit involved in it and doing talks and just get a lot of good educational information. So if you have the opportunity to attend AQO, whether it be virtual or next year, hopefully it'll be live again, it's well worth the time investment to attend. All right, next slide. Yeah. So database news newsletter. This is an electronic newsletter that is published 6 times a year. It's sent out via email. So it updates you on current information regarding each database, public reporting, registration for meetings, data submissions. So if you're not receiving this, please reach out to us and let us know so we can add you. Sometimes you had your email, but I see this all the time in the FAQ mailbox. People send me a question, I'll send an answer back, and then my answer gets rejected. So make sure that STS is on your whitelist at the hospital so that the emails do not get blocked from getting to you. We have a lot of those issues at times. And it's usually on the hospital end. Carol, do you have anything to add to that?
I'm going to add something. So thank you. That's correct. Usually we'll have your email address and we send emails out to the primary and backup data contacts and usually your surgeon, the surgeons who are associated on your account. But sometimes those emails get blocked somewhere along the line. Either they're getting blocked at your site, not delivered, for some reason. So we are now able to accept a secondary email for you, which could be a personal email. And those have had much better success with receiving our email. So if you are not receiving our emails or not getting the data, new data or getting the STS news, we'll be happy. I'll put an email into the chat box and just email Jane at the address and let her know you'd like to add a personal email to your account for communication. So I'll do that now. Thanks, Melinda. Great point.
Well, thank you. Next slide. So the next thing we're going to talk about, another really good resource, are the regional groups. And we have regional groups. Pretty much every region has some sort of regional group. Some are more active than others. Some have monthly calls. Some actually have a conference every year. Michigan, Texas, Maryland tend to be, and Northwest tend to be extremely active. Some of the other ones aren't as active, but they're becoming more active. If you are interested in joining a regional group, the regional group information is on the sts.org website with the contact of who is the regional leader in your particular part of the country. So now we're going to talk about another really good resource for data managers, and it's the frequently asked questions, or the FAQ mailbox. And each registry has an FAQ mailbox. I just happen to be managing the adult cardiac one, so I'm going to speak a little bit more to that. But each one has their own mailbox and has a person that answers the questions for that particular registry. So this is found on the sts.org website. You just keep scrolling down past the live webinars and the resources, and they'll say clinical question request form, and you just ask a question. So when you click in that ask the question button, next slide, you'll get something that looks like this. Now I'm going to just talk a little bit about how important this is. And I'm talking from a perspective about, because I'm answering these questions. So it's important that I have your name, your email, correct, your phone number. That's really important. People think, oh, that's not important, but it is, because if I keep trying to send you answers and it keeps getting blocked, and then you keep sending me emails and saying, why aren't you answering my questions? That's why our phone number is really important. That way I can at least reach out to you and say, hey, I've sent this 3 times, and let's see if we can figure out why these emails aren't getting to you. So that's really important. Participant ID, and then the database version, especially now, since we just went to a new version, it's real important for me to know which version I'm answering the question from, because sometimes the data definitions are slightly different in different versions. And then the sequence number is real important. A lot of times I can figure out what you're asking me just by reading the question, but sometimes there may seem to be 3 questions in one question, and I'm like, what are the sequence numbers that they're really concerned about? So that is important. The more information you send, the better, because a lot of times I have to reach out and say, oh, can you elaborate on this? Can you kind of give me some background on this? Turnaround time, we have up to 30 days to answer a question, but most often it's much quicker than that. But let me explain the process. So I go through the questions first. If I can answer them, you'll get your answer in a timely fashion. Generally somewhere between 3 to 7 days. I'm a little backed up now with the new version. But if I read the question and I can't answer it completely, or I want to talk to perhaps Carol about it, or we need to take it to the surgeons, then it could take up to 3 weeks, at times up to a month. So that's why we say we have 30 days to answer the questions. But generally speaking, it's quite a bit quicker than that, unless we get some delay and have to take it to the surgeons. Okay. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about just the specific other resources for each specific registry. And I'm just going to focus on adult cardiac, but know that each one of these, general thoracic, congenital, intermax, has the same, pretty much the same resources when you go into it. They're going to have training manuals, and they're going to have their own specs and things like that. So adult cardiac, we're going to focus on. And when you push that adult cardiac button, next slide, you are going to see that down below it, it has access data collection resources, okay? That's where we're gonna house a lot of stuff, a lot of really good information. So, one of the things that you're gonna find under those additional resources, in addition to the training manual, you're going to find data collection forms. Now, there's two types on there. There's one that is non-annotated, and there's one that's annotated. Now, in my personal opinion, the annotated is the one that I always want to use because it has the sequence number for the field right there in red. Because when I abstract, I still go to my data dictionary, and you can easily search the data dictionary by doing Control F and then just typing in the sequence number or a particular word if you're looking for like a particular word like T-bar or tab or whatever, and then you can quickly search it. So I prefer the annotated, but there are two. The other thing you'll see here, training manuals. We update the training manual every month, and it usually comes out the first week after the month is over. So the September one is coming out any day now. I've already sent it over to Carol for the final. And in addition to the training manual coming out every month, we have an FAQ summary that also comes out. So you'll see, instead of having to go through the whole training manual and look for the stuff in red, you will see what was updated each month. Okay. And I do want to just say one thing about the training manual and use of it. If you are abstracting a case in July, then you need to use a surgery date in July. You need to use the training manual for July, okay? If you are abstracting a case with a procedure date in August, then you need to use the August training manual. That's how the auditors will use it when they audit you.
And Melinda, just to clarify on that point, it's the dates are listed in the training manual. So the training manual that is posted online now for August, if there were any updates made from July, because this version went live in July, it would be labeled July. And so those updates that are labeled July would apply to cases that are July and after. And then for August, if we had any updates in August, those updates are labeled for August 2020, and those would apply to OR dates starting August 1st through and forward. So, and we'll go through we can go do a quick run through the website too, the live website too, if you'd like, if we have time at the end.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, that might be helpful. So, and thanks for adding that in, Carol, because I probably made it sound like I didn't say it right. So that's good. I'm glad you clarified that. Thank you.
Okay. You just don't need to download and save all of the training manual because it's like a cumulative. The training manual is cumulative, and that nice document that Melinda provides for like a snippet of what's in the changes for the month. Both are very helpful, but they're both cumulative. So no need to save previous training manuals.
Yeah, and no need to go back to, like, if something comes up in the training manual that was updated, there's really no need for you to go back and change your records either, based on new information. So, all right, so a little bit about the training manual. And this is why I like the annotated form. So, for example, you've got sequence number 205. Well, you got your long name, which is hospital name. You've got the short name, and then you have a definition. Directly under the definition, there's always, and I should have put this on the slide, there's always an intent clarification. So know that once the definitions are out, we can't go and change the definition. Okay, that's a spec kind of software thing. We can't go back and change definitions, but under the definition, there's an intent clarification. So if we need to provide further guidance or clarify something in that definition that may or may not be confusing, that's where it'll be. So always read past your definition into the intent clarification to help you further understand what that definition means. And then below the intent clarification will be where we add the FAQs that may come through that may also provide clarity for the particular sequence number that you're looking at. Okay, so more resources. We have more resources. We've got data specs. We're going to talk about those today. Software specs, we're going to talk about those. Since this is a new version, we've got change summary, all kinds of changes that were happened. The procedure ID chart is a great additional resource. We will talk about that next week. The risk model variable chart, we're going to talk about that today. The risk model endpoint chart, oh, that's new, Carol.
Yeah, that's new. We used to not have that one posted now.
Wow, okay. So if we have time, maybe Carol can mention that to us today. We have the congenital diagnosis, procedure list, case inclusion guide, which we've never had before. This is, we're going to talk a little bit about that, and the aorta device list. So these are all the resources that are just on the site. So first we're going to talk about the data specs. And it's just going to be brief because we only have an hour, but I'm going to at least show you how to read a data spec. So, for example, the long name here is renal failure dialysis, basically. That's what we got. We got our sequence number 375. It'll tell you the definition. It'll tell you the format, text format, data user, harvest code. So if you see a code of 1, that equals yes. If you see a code of 2, that equals no. 3 is unknown for harvest codes. The other thing, next slide, that a data spec will tell you, for example, this is sequence 365, diabetes control. So you will see that the parent name of this field is diabetes.
Sorry, Melinda. Sorry.
The parent name is diabetes, and the harvest code is 1. So if the parent is answered yes, then you have to answer this field. This is a child field. Okay, so this is telling you, this is basically telling you this is a child field. And it has a parent, and diabetes is its parent. And then the next one. This is real important, and I get a lot of questions in the FAQ about this. So I want to talk about the format first. So this says real. Well, you know, what does that mean? Believe me, I had to look it up myself. It's a number with at least 1 decimal in it, okay? And then the other format that you'll see quite often is integer. That is a number with no decimal. So if you look at the ranges down here, so this is the way the specs are set up. So we have a usual range. So normally the height's going to be somewhere between 122 and 213. That's the usual range, okay? But on the other side over here, we have what the low value is. So the absolute lowest value that you can enter in for height is 20. That's pretty short. And then the absolute highest value that you can enter in for height is 251. If you have somebody that is actually 260 centimeters and you put it in the database, you're going to get an illegal error. This is, you cannot enter that because the absolute high value that you can enter is 251. So if that happens, then enter the 251 because there's no other way. You're never going to be able to get the 260 in there because of the way the spec is written. Okay? All right. Okay, so now we're going to move on to another great resource that probably hardly anybody reads. I know I don't know when I read this. It might have been 2 years in before I read this. I probably didn't even know it existed then. So I'm going to just highlight some pages in it to show you some of the things that are in it that might provide a good resource for you. So on page 4, we have the dates of the versions, which is really good. So if you're like trying to remember when was version 2.81, when did it start, stop, when did it start, you can see it right there and it will tell you exactly. So it's a great resource. The next resource that I want to point out is on page 6. And this tells you how to read the data specs that we were just kind of going over. So the important thing here is the integer is right there, numeric values with no decimals, the real numeric values with at least 1 decimal. Text basically is like just a text field that's open. You can contain any alphanumeric characters. So this kind of tells you how to read the data specs, especially that integer and real number. If you're like me, it's been a long time since I did math in high school. So things like that do help when you go to read the data specs. All right. And again, I'm just pointing this out. So if you see this, this is a real. So you know it has a decimal, and it can have 1 decimal, you can have 1 after the decimal, or you can have 2 after the decimal. So it depends on how the spec's written. So like the other day, somebody asked me about post-op creatinine and in the new version. And how many decimal points to enter after. And I went into the specs and I saw, well, it's written as 2, so you can enter up to 2. So that's why the data specs are quite helpful. All right, next. So again, software specs, page 11. So this tells you about the record identification number and what that is and what that means. It's a unique numerical value that identifies each record in the database. It's generated by the STS. It's going to sort of look like V01000, It's kind of a funky looking number, but that's your record ID. It's not something that you can make. It's not something that you can change. It's generated by the STS, and it follows the record throughout the lifetime. So, okay. Then we have page 14 of the software specs. This talks a little bit about information that can be imported into your data form. One of the main things that we use and a lot of facilities use is the ADT tool. That's where you can import the last name, the first name, the middle name, the date of birth, things like that into the STS form. We don't have a lot of information that can be imported in. And the reason is because it's very important to have the data manager's eyes on this data. Limitations of informatics, especially with writing codes correctly. And then you may have differences in definitions. Like, for example, you might, if you wanted to import height and weight in, well, your medical record might say, oh, well, I'm going to pick the admit height and weight to import in. But that's not the height and weight we want for STS. So that's why not a lot of tools fields can be imported in, but just a few, mainly ADT is pretty much the big one you'll see. Okay. The next one is talking about parent-child relationships. So if you don't understand a parent-child relationship, this will tell you. But basically, a parent field is a field that is controls the child field. So you have, like, for example, diabetes. The question is, do you have diabetes? Yes or no, or unknown. If you answer yes, then there's the child field below it that's going to say, well, what kind of treatment are you on for this? Okay. And so that's how parent-child fields work. So if you answer yes to the parent, then the child's going to automatically open up and you're going to be expected to answer the child too. Page 26 of the software specs tells you a little bit about the MELD score calculation. Some people wonder, well, why don't I get a MELD score? Well, you have to have an INR, a total bili, and a creatinine to even calculate the MELD score. So if you don't have a total bili in your entered into your data, you're not going to have a MELD score because it's not going to be able to calculate. And this is a system calculation. So this is kind of a useful information. I felt like to point that out to you. Page 27 talks about calculation of vent hours of your total post-op initial ventilation hours. So this is the calculation. So, basically it says, it's telling you this is how it's calculated. So if either the OR exit date or the extubation date are missing, you're not going to have a total vent hours. It's going to be missing too. So that's a useful piece of information to know. On page 29, we have the field short names and sequence number by data version. And as you can see, over the years, for example, antibiotic discontinuation. In 2.61, the sequence number was 1347. But now, in 4.2, it's 2290. So this is helpful, I think, if you are querying data over a long period of time through multiple different versions. It's very important that you would know what the same field was in a different version and what the sequence number was. So it's in there on page 29. Okay. Now, we're going to talk about the case inclusion guide. It's under the additional resources. This is the first time we've ever done something like this in all the years that I've been with the STS database. And it is not an all-inclusive list, okay? It is a guide to assist you. If for any reason you're not sure if your case goes in or should go in, or then you need to send in an FAQ. But pretty much, we've got it broken down into required cases, which all your cabs, your valves, your aorta is above the diaphragm. And then it goes down. We also have it separated out into optional cases. And when I say optional, that is really at the discretion of the surgeon. If the surgeon, for example, wants his pericardial windows put in, standalone pericardial windows put in, then you can put them in. Those are optional cases. So this is just a guide. I think that it's really, since we put it out, I've seen quite a decrease in questions about case inclusion. So I'm hoping that this will be very helpful for people. Okay, the next resource that we have, surgeon worksheets. We have a lot of them. So we've got several different aorta ones. We've got AFib ones, cabbage, TEs, valve ones. These are worksheets that we have made up that are in Word version so that you certainly could alter these to your needs and what works best for your facility. These are worksheets that surgeons can fill out to help you do your job better. A lot of sites do use these. Some sites don't use them at all. It's totally optional. It's there if you need it, and it certainly can be altered. So if you don't like the way it's laid out, your surgeon doesn't like the way it's laid out, you can certainly move things around. That's why we put it in a Word version.
And just going to add one thing to this, Melinda. This is Carol. The first link here is a PDF form, and you actually have to click on the words here that says Word version to get the Word document. So we have it listed in both PDF and Word. The PDF form prints better. If you're happy with the form and you just want to print it, I would use the PDF link, which is the first one.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So the next resource, and this is the aorta cheat sheet. This, Carol just came up with it. I think it's wonderful. So, and I'll just give you the history. So in version 2.9, we had to manually enter the aorta devices in. And that was very cumbersome for people. And we thought that we had fixed this in version 4.2, but nope, oopsie did not. So it's still a text field. So you have to type the model number for the aorta devices in. But what Carol came up with is a wonderful little cheat sheet, which we're going to go into on the next slide a little more in detail, but it is as a resource for you so that you don't have to enter so many model numbers in. And on the next slide, you'll see, for example, if you had this ipsilateral leg endoprosthesis and it was RLT 231212. So you would go and you would search this aorta device list, and you can search it by ipsilateral, gore, whatever, whatever term you choose to search it by. And you see there's the RLT right there, and it's got 6 numbers after it. So if you see RLT with 6 numbers after it on your model number, then all you have to do is choose 801 instead of typing RLT 231212 in. We don't have a complete list yet. I mean, we pretty much, it's very long, but we are still, if you come across a device that's not on there, if you send us the sticker, send me something through the FAQ mailbox and say, we don't have this. Carol is like collecting a list of that. We're going to update this periodically to make it easier. It's just to make it easier for you guys to code. One of the other resources that we have is the congenital diagnosis and procedure list. So if you happen to be doing a congenital procedure in the adult, that's section, oh gosh, is that M? No, I can't remember. The congenital section.
M1 or M2, I forget which. I think it's either, it's one of the M's.
No, that's what I was saying. It's one of those M's. If you happen to be doing a congenital procedure, and this list is actually quite helpful, you can just go in and type, you can search it just like you search anything else, and it helps you to code your congenital procedures accurately in the database. Okay, the next thing, and probably the last thing we're going to have time to talk about on this part of the webinar is the risk model variable chart. So the purpose of risk adjustment is to allow the STS database participants to compare their performance with other participants by accounting for and controlling patient risks that are present prior to surgery. And so that by doing risk adjustment, you're kind of you're leveling the playing field as best as possible. And the important thing to know is that in your national report, somewhere around page 20 to 23, it talks about what happens if you have missing required variables or categorical variables. So, for example, a required variable is age. So if you don't have an age, if age is missing or you don't have a no value, then you're not going to get a risk calculation for that patient. It tells you there. And then we have categorical variables such as EF. That's one. So it tells you if EF is missing or less than 10, then, and you are male, you're male, okay, then your EF is going to be set at 55. If you're female, it's going to be set at 58, okay? That's if you have chronic heart failure. If you have acute or both, then the male is going to be set at 40 and the female is going to be set at 45. So that's why it's important to make sure that you have the fields that are in the risk model chart filled out and not missing data if at all possible. And we're going to go through those fields and I'll just briefly show you. So we're just, for example, we're just going to look at operative mortality. This is what the risk model chart looks like, okay, for CABG. And each column above will tell you what's, you know, the X's will tell you what variables are in each one of these metrics. So operative mortality metric, here's what the risk variables are. Stroke, there's what they are, renal failure. So you just kind of go across. We'll look at the operative mortality. Now, I've got some red arrows on here because I'm just going to point out some things that people may not know that's in the risk model. So payer, primary payer, secondary payer is in the risk model. So it's important to fill that information out. Of course, we already said age is required. Then height, weight, diabetes, labs, crit, white blood cell, platelets, dialysis. On the next page, chronic lung. I mean, pretty much all your risks are alcohol. I wanted to point that one out. It's in the risk model. And I know that I get a lot of questions, you know, we have conflicting documentation about alcohol. Well, you know, it's in the risk model, so perhaps process improvement to get that documentation in order, or sometimes they're not even documenting alcohol. So it is in the risk model. So I wanted to point that out. On the next page, the thing to know is that sequence 915, NYHA, is in the risk model. Now, in version 4.2, this is now an independent field. It used to be a child field of heart failure. It's not anymore. So probably a really good process improvement project would be get your doctors to document that, because I've gotten multiple questions and they say, oh, they don't document this. They don't ever document this. So I did want to point that out. It is in the risk model. The other important things that I want to point out that a lot of people don't think about it, because I've gone into look at other people's entries before, and I'll see that they don't even have any insufficiencies for their aortic, mitral, or tricuspid valves. They just don't think it's important to enter it. It's all in the risk model for operative mortality.
That's a great point, Melinda, because I think when people are abstracting for CABGs, that they don't consider the valves to be important. And this is the operative mortality for a CABG case, and you can see that all of these fields related to valves are used in risk adjustment. So if you're not documenting these or abstracting these, or the information's not accurate, your risk is not being adjusted properly. So it could actually play into your outcomes if you don't have these variables abstracted correctly, and make it seem like your site's doing worse than what it actually is if we don't have these information and the patient has, you know, severe aortic or mitral insufficiency. So it's really important to document these variables accurately. That's a great point. That's a great thing to point out. Thank you.
Well, I've seen it. That's why I was pointing it out. I've seen it before where CABG they were just doing CABG. They weren't doing valve cases, and they didn't think it was important to fill it out. So I did want to bring that up. On the last page, I want to bring up assist devices. So the key here that I want to point out in these assist devices is that when, because it's always when and pre-op or intra-op. So for example, if you have a pre-op and a post-op balloon pump, always code the pre-op, okay? If you have a pre-op and an intra-op, still code the pre-op. Post-ops don't go into the risk model because that's a post-op event. So always, if you've got a choice between putting a pre-op one in, coding the pre-op one, or the post-op one, always code the pre or the intra-op over the post-op. I wanted to point that out. Okay, so just a few housekeeping tips, and then we'll go into some questions. We'll have some time for questions. Data collection forms or your notes, however you do it. Some people use the form, some people don't use the form, some people just use a note. It's important to keep it somewhere around 4 years, about 4 years for audit purposes. Again, you also need a log of 30-day mortality, 30-day readmission, 30-day deep sternal wound and infection in event of an audit. Because if you were to get audited, they would say, well, what's your process for checking mortality? And so this log can be as simple as if you use a data collection form, staple on a piece of paper on that and saying, well, I called the doctor's office on this day and the patient was alive and didn't have affection, okay? Or you could have an Excel spreadsheet. It doesn't have to be a formal process. It's just whatever process that you use and how you document that this patient was alive, not readmitted, and not infected. So that the auditors can see what your process is and how you're doing it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm just going to add on to that because we're looking at the audit results as they came back from the 2019-2018 data audit. And these fields we scored really low on the audit, and the main reason why we scored low on is not because patients were readmitted and the sites coded those as not readmissions. The reason why we scored low is because the sites were not keeping some type of tracking on these patients. So it can be as simple as a note on the DCF or something in your vendor software. I would just, if you're keeping a log, you have to keep a log how you're checking these patients for these 3 fields, and it will save you it'll save you a lot of time in the end when you're doing, if you do ever get audited, and it'll make your results look great. I can't express that enough because it makes us look like we have bad data when we get a poor audit result back on 30-day mortality, because it doesn't matter the reason why, it's just that we did poor on it. So it's really important, like Melinda said, to keep that log.
All right.
Sorry.
Thank you, Carol. Great information. So we are going to try to answer as many questions as we can. We've got about 10 minutes.
I'm going to go over, Melinda, if it's okay, I want to do a quick rundown, just take a few minutes here just to do a quick rundown of the STS website.
That'd be great.
Website to show folks where things are at. So this is sts.org. And when you get here, you'll come to this page. The 4th blue tab at the top is registries. And you can either click directly on registries or click on the STS National Database. If you click on registries, you'll then have to click on STS National Database. And then you'll see these 4 green tabs that Melinda was talking about in her slides. And the first one is adult cardiac. But first I'm going to show you exactly what's on. This is the home page for the database. And this is where you're going to find the general information. You'll find things about joining. You'll find the information for the live webinars. You'll find this is where you'll find to submit the FAQ to Melinda, and then our additional important resources. We have our harvest schedule here. The database forms is if you wanted to add somebody onto your participant, you would do that here. If you need to add a surgeon, you'll find all the information here. And then we have our advances in quality and outcomes, a data managers meeting. And then in other information, if you're concerned about HIPAA at your site, we have our HIPAA information and then FAQ for HIPAA. And from this page, I just want to show you where the information is about AQO. And we have early bird pricing right now through September 7th. It's half off. So for members, for STS members, it's $75. For STS non-members, it's $100 for the adult, and then the price doubles if you wanted to do all four. And I'll show you the pricing is down here. You'll register here. We have letters of justification if your site requires that for payment. And then here's the pricing down here. After September 7th, the price doubles. For adult, and I'm just gonna kind of go through this quickly because I know we have a couple questions here to answer. For adult cardiac, it will be on Thursday, October 1st. And we will have pre-recorded material available ahead of time, a week or so ahead of time for folks to watch. And then the live presentations or semi-live presentations will start on October 1st. The sessions offered this day, we have a really great lineup of live sessions, and you'll see all the on-demand. For live sessions, Melinda and Dr. Whitman will be doing really great presentations on two topics that are very important to the database and to helping you capture the risk appropriately and get your outcomes adjusted accurately on hemodynamics, echo, and then an interesting case on a deteriorating patient. And this one is really interesting. It involves a TAVR patient gone bad who requires SAVR. And I'm really interested to see their presentation on this. The other live presentations will be talking about a case to be abstracted that involves the aortic valve root and arch. And Dr. Kim and Desire, surgeon leaders in the aorta world. Nancy Honeycutt is a member of our core group. Talk about incidence and spacing. This is going to be focused on if you're doing an aorta case and the patient has had previous CABG, how do you code the incidence for that patient? And it all relates to previous procedures and spacing. Mitral valve abstraction, and we'll be talking about the Carpentier classification. And then mazes, we have a new section for 4.2 about the maze and AFib. And then Ann Greco will be talking about assist devices, about VADs and Impellas and things like that. And then we have an open Q&A. So for $75 or $100, this, and we also offer CEs. So I don't know the number that we'll be offering this year. Last year it was around 16. For $100, I think this is a full day worth of information. In addition to that, we have the on-demand content, which is also really important information and highly recommended. If you can get if you can get time to join and you're able to do that, I highly recommend it. And I don't think you can beat this type of education for $100. So usually AQO is around, like, I think around $400 or $500. So offering this amount of information from surgeon leaders is a great thing to check into. So if I go back under STS National Database, I'm going to click on this link for adult cardiac. You'll see the access to data collection resources here. And this is where you'll find the versions, past versions. And we're currently in version 4.2. And this is where you'll find the training manual, that FAQ summary that Melinda was talking about, all the different versions of the data collection form, the surgeon worksheets, and the additional resources, the data specs, the software specifications, procedure identifications, risk model charts, and case inclusion aorta device list. So I just wanted to show folks where that was at. And now I guess we can go over to questions. Melinda, sorry for interrupting, but sometimes.
That's great. I'm actually thinking maybe next time I'll just use that format instead of the slides.
Whatever works for you. It's nice. Both, I think, are nice. Okay. Ready to do questions?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to pull this back up here.
So Rachel says, how much experience as a data manager are you looking for to mentor? No, definitely you're experienced enough, Rachel.
Yeah, please sign up as a mentor. And I put Addie's email into the chat box. So reach out to Addie Dolan and she'll be happy to help you get set up. It's adolan@sts.org.
I think anybody with, I would say what, 2 to 5 years, 3 to 5 years would probably make a great mentor. So if you're interested, please sign up because there's a lot of new people out there that need a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
And trust me, if you've been doing it 2 to 5 years, you know a lot more than they know. So do you recommend that the data be abstracted onto paper abstraction forms? I think that's a choice. I mean, me personally, I always have notes on a piece of paper. And then I enter as I'm going along. But I always take notes. I have a little section. I don't ever use the data collection form. To me, that's too much paper. I just use like a half sheet of notebook paper and I write notes in certain areas. So it's however works out best for you, Linda, whatever you prefer to do.
Whatever your system is, right? Okay.
Where can you locate the training manual for July? Okay, Carol, let's see.
Registries, STS National Database, Adult Cardiac, Access Data Collection Resources, version 4.20, training manual.
And the training manual really has some really good information in it.
Yeah, so I wanted to show you real quick. So this is the training manual. We have some links right at the beginning for you, some introductions. It'll tell you how to read the data collection form. And then this one is the values outside of an acceptable range. I would review this. It's Melinda went over it. This is another way to learn that information. And now say we do bookmarks. So when you open the bookmark page, you'll see all the sections here. And the sequence numbers where we put an update is listed here. So if you just click on that, it might be down, it's down here at the bottom. But you'll see here that the new ones are in red and it'll say FAQ August 2020. If we had an FAQ from July, it would be right underneath here that said FAQ July 2020. So it's cumulative. So all the FAQs are listed within the document. And on the other resource, the FAQ summary sheet here. This is from August, and they're all listed here. And I think maybe we didn't, we do have some from July, so they're listed here, right underneath. Okay.
So while you're navigating, can you show, we need to find the data manager resources.
Sure. So that was under, if you go under registries and STS National Database, see if it'll go there for us. It's thinking. 1 second, please. It's going to be slow now. Okay. On this page, if you scroll down a little bit, this is where you'll find the information on the webinars. If you scroll down a little bit under Data Manager Education, this is...
You just keep scrolling down, you'll find the anatomical stuff.
Oh, it's way down here.
Yep, there it is.
So coronary anatomy valve repairs, and if you click on it, you'll see a nice picture of a heart and gives a little bit of information on the vessels, the branches, and things like that. So again, that was registries, STS National Database, and when you scroll down on this page, under Data Manager Education, and down here it's anatomical diagrams.
Okay. So what are your thoughts about automation to capture more from the patient's chart directly? Well, there's specific rules. A lot of that we can't do. In those software specs, there's certain things that can be imported in and certain things that can't. But honestly, I will tell you that my experience with the NCDR and some of the some hospitals actually import data in my mind, that makes it harder because then I have to go and check to see if the answers are right. And then I have to remember, oh, did I check that answer? Me personally, I like a clean slate, but that's just the way I work. To me, it's,
There's a lot of issues too, because we don't have we have SNOMED codes for most of our definitions, but there's not a consistency yet across EHRs to implement those. And so we get into mapping issues within the EHR, and if any, Epic updates frequently. So if we have an update within the Epic platform at a site, it might not be mapped in your vendor software, and they might have to do constant remapping when those updates occur. So it gets kind of messy, and it's not a spot right now where we feel that the integrity of the data is safe to do that for more than what we're calling upon.
Yeah, and I see Carrie's saying that some facilities do their own, and I know I've seen that, and my experience with that is that it's very difficult for me when I'm entering if somebody else has scraped a bunch of data in, because I've got to check all the scraped data, and then I got to remember that I checked the scraped data for accuracy.
Yeah, and actually STS doesn't allow that. So sites that are doing that should not be doing that. Only the values that we have listed as allowed for automation should be being pulled in, and that leads back to the validity and integrity of the data. We saw that too, and it just shouldn't be happening at sites, but I know it's out there, unfortunately. And I think that would cause a lot of extra work for people to have to validate all that stuff.
It sure caused me a lot of extra work when I had to do it. I would be like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. How many facilities are able to have the surgeons complete the form? Yvonne, I don't know the exact number, but based on the FAQ mailbox, I'd say probably about, for aorta worksheets, I'd say probably about 20%, just based on all the aorta questions I get.
We looked at, we have a field in the database that says surgeon involvement, or did surgeons provide input or something like that for the operative, it's in the operative section. And I think when we did the upgrade, it was probably around between 70 and 80%. I would have to double check that. I might be mistaken, but we all thought it was pretty high to be marking those fields in. The surgeon worksheets is one way to be doing that, but
yeah. I think a lot of people mark that if they have an op note, and they feel like.
Yeah, that's okay too. That's okay, as long as you're not left with any questions. Okay.
So what else we got here? What if there's no echo to obtain the value? Well, if there is no echo, then again, if you don't have an EF, in order to get the risk adjustment calculation, it's going to give you an EF. That's what it's going to do. That's what that software spec says it's going to do.
Yeah, so those are imputated values, and the reason we have to imputate those values is because the risk model, it requires that value to do a calculation. So if we don't have a value, or we have a value that's absurdly low, like less than 10%, it's going to default to what a normal value is according to gender. So that's where those values that Melinda showed, those are all based on the risk models, and we need those to do the calculation. So. And if you don't have an EF in the echo, you might be able to find that in the cath report, right, Melinda?
Yes. Or a stress report. You got a nuke stress or something, they might find an EF there too.
Great, thank you.
Carol, I know you have to go.
That's all right, let's finish these questions. It's fine, we should finish these questions.
Okay. What if your site extracts the information from the chart, however, it keeps an electronic audit for 30-day mortality? As long as you've got some record of that, Janice, and I'm not sure exactly what you mean by electronic audit, but as long as you've got some documentation of that process and how you've done that to verify it, it should work.
Thanks, Melinda.
This one's for you, Carol.
Oh, is the submission deadline still tomorrow? Also, do we need to submit a whole year of data? I had submitted all of the 2019 data. I then submitted January through June. Is that correct? Just a bit nervous with the IQVIA issue. So that should be fine, Yvonne. And as of right now, the close date is September 4th. I'm not anticipating that it's going to change. So the close date is September 4th. For the time frame for your data, you do not need to submit a whole year's worth of data. So I explained it this way. Our last close was Harvest 4 for 2019, and that included, Harvest 1 for 2020. and that included data through December 31st of 2020, OR dates. If you made a submission for Harvest 1 and you did not make any changes to any cases prior to including and prior to 12/31/2019, you did not make any changes to those OR dates, and you only have new data for January 1 through June 30th of 2020, you only need to submit the new data. So you would only need to submit January through June. If you made a change to data back in 2019, say you made a submission for Harvest 1 and included dates through 12/31, and then for, say in February, you realized, oh my gosh, I made an error and I need to go update an October chart. And you go and update an October chart. You still need to submit January through June of 2020, and then just a short time frame to include that October file, that October record that was updated. It could even just be a day's worth of submission for that time frame. So IQVIA has all of the data that you submitted for previous harvest, and it has all of the data that was submitted from the that was submitted over to DCRI at the end of Harvest 3 of 2019, which is through September 30th. Or I'm sorry, Harvest 4, which was through September 30th. So they have all of that historic data. You only need to update, you only need to submit new data or updated data. New data from January and on, and then updated data from December and December 31st and prior. I think that answered it. Oh, staff had difficulty registering for the upcoming AQO meeting. What can we do to get the discount if the registration platform is not functional? So I haven't heard that we were having any issues with the registration platform, but if for some reason you are having difficulty or your site needs to send in a check payment or anything like that, I'll provide you 2 email addresses to reach out to. The first one is Amy Cash and the other one is Emily Conrad, and both folks can help you with getting yours, getting registered. Want to take the next? Oh, and then when will the on-demand content be available? My understanding is that it should be available a week prior to the start of AQO, and our meetings department will be reaching out with information on how to access the Cadmium platform. Cadmium's who's hosting AQO. So understanding that our meetings department will be reaching out to folks who have registered with login information and all of that.
So Pat is interested in the mentor program. Pat, you can go on you can contact Emily Conrad at STS, or you can just go right onto the website, and when you scroll down, it has under Data Manager Resources, talks about the mentor program, and there's, I think, a form if you want to be a mentor. You can fill that form out. You'd make a great mentor. Okay, let's see what's next here. Scrolling. I've had difficulty with the timing of the 30 days post-op. To be safe, I use 30 days after discharge, not procedure, which is correct. Well, it depends on what you're looking for. Mortality is procedure, 30 days after procedure. Readmit is 30 days after discharge, and infection is 30 days after procedure. Do you have a chart or list of all parent fields available?
Yeah, so there is a list available for the parent fields, and I was just going to show the mentor information, mentor-mentee information.
You go into the data manager, yeah, I think it's right in there.
Click here, and actually Addie has now taken over the mentorship program from Emily, so either person can help you, but Addie will be the person, and we just need to update the page here. So data management program, and you can click there, and then yeah, it just happened, Melinda. You thought
I see it. It just happened. Let's go on.
It just happened. And then there's a mentor or mentee. A mentor is somebody who provides education. A mentee is somebody who accepts that education. So if you need education, you're a mentee. If you want to help people out, you're a mentor. For the parent-child fields under registries and STS National Database, adult cardiac, I believe it's under
all the parent fields. I'm trying to figure.
I believe it's in
It's in the data specs, isn't it? Or is it in the software specs?
I'm not sure. It's in one of these forms. If you can't find it through, I'm not sure exactly which one. It's in here though. It has it might be the change document. I might be wrong. Hold on. I think this is it. Yeah, so this is the field. It's the change summary for version
there it is.
0.2, and it'll show you what each field, the changes, and then it'll tell you if it's a parent or not. I thought, maybe not.
Yeah, it says parent value. Parent, is it checked? Oh, they're not checked, are they?
No,
well,
we can ask DC IQVIA to provide that for us.
Okay. Why was it decided to have ranges on areas like the vent hours and the ICU hours? I think limiting abstractors to stay within a range is not only false documentation, but it's also not reflecting the illness of the patient.
Sure, so I can take this one. I can take this one, Melinda. You can go ahead, or I wanted to show this.
Well, Pat's just given us some nice comments. I've actually learned so much today, and I have to thank you. There is so much on the SDS website that we are sometimes get too busy to go through. It was a great refresher. Well, thanks, Pat, for that feedback.
Yeah, thank you. So the reason why we have to have ranges is because the way the risk models are built, the ranges are, when you get outside of the low and high value, there's so much noise on the model that they become, it's no longer statistically significant when we're so far outside either high or low. So we have to set values to where we see the significance, for these ranges. So it's completely acceptable to code something for purposes of data management and for data analysis. This is different than documentation. This is data analysis. So when we're looking at data analysis, if you have things that are so far low or so far high that they no longer make sense, they actually can ruin the site's calculation for the outcomes. So that's why we have to set values for low and high. It's not telling you to document in your medical record anything incorrectly. It's talking about the purposes of analysis and what we need in the database to do accurate analysis. The risk for patients who are at this high end, say you have an INR of 30, this is probably so ridiculously high that if you ever see this, it might be once or twice in a lifetime, if ever. The reason why we do this is there's no more increased risk if this patient is 32 or 33 or 34, because the risk is so high at this end that it can't get any further with anything above this value, and same thing with the low values. So it's more about the analysis on the data and what we're doing with the risk adjustment versus the documentation that occurs at your site. Do you have anything to add to that, Melinda?
No, that's great. Thank you.
So only ADT automation is allowed, nothing beyond that. So we have a list of the automated, and then the next question is about what fields are automated. And this is the software spec. So you find that here under the STS National Database Adult Cardiac section, software specs, and it'll take you to this form. And when we go down here, I think I would have to probably search.
It's page 14. That's where it starts on about page 14 in the specs.
Oh, here it is. Thanks. So this is where you'll find it. The UDIs are available to come over, and then here's the list of the ADT fields that are.
Let me get to the next question.
Okay.
Where did it go? Sorry, did you say to resubmit if I made change in 2019?
Yeah, if you've made a change in your 2019 data that hasn't been updated in the IQVIA warehouse, then you need to at least submit a record that contains that file.
What's next? Are there any individual exceptions to the Harvest 2-3 deadline for sites that are furloughed for 3 months?
No, we, so this data was through June 30th, and we already extended it for a week, but we have to stay on this timeline to, so the timeline of the data inclusion was about 8 weeks ago. So sites have had 2 months to get their data in from then, and hopefully they weren't doing too many cases, but we know sites were furloughed. Everybody was kind of in the same boat. When your administration furloughed you, they had to take this into consideration as well. So if you're not able to get your data in, I would talk to your administration and just let them know that the reason why the data wasn't in is because you were furloughed.
Thanks so much. Everybody says thank you. Great information from Yvonne.
Yeah, that's great.
Looks like that's all the questions. We're next Wednesday. We have part 2, and that's PROC ID, national report, things of that nature we'll be talking about next week.
Yep, and you'll find information in addition to the emails that come out from our marketing. You'll find information on the webinars here under registries, and then STS National Database, and then scroll down here to the live webinars, view webinars, and you'll find a list. The adult cardiac ones are listed first. You can join the webinar right here for next week. And then the past recordings, we have most recent ones available here. And then down at the bottom of this list, you'll see a YouTube playlist. And this will take you to our, the adult cardiac database has its own playlist, and you'll see all of the webinars from past episodes here. So lots of information to help you, hopefully. Okay.
Thanks, everybody. We really appreciate you attending. Hope you have a good rest of your day.
Really great job, Melinda. Thank you. Really
Thank you, Carol.
Great job, guys.
Thanks, Addie. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye.